Hi, I'm Kristin Clark, and I'm here today with Melissa Mieyr, and we're going to talk about merit aid versus need-based aid on College Planning Untangled. And as my viewers know, this is all about helping to simplify the college planning process for our parents and our families. That's really what we try to talk about. And I got to tell you, Melissa, when you start talking financial, this, I think, is one of the most confusing pieces of planning for college. And it's kind of like going to the doctor. You never know what you're going to end up with, right? You get this bill and you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck is this, right? But there are so many terms, so many things to consider, and it's expensive, by the way. College is expensive if we haven't heard of that before. So, it's really important, for our families to know this. So one of the things, number one, hello, I'll take a breath and let you talk for a minute.
Hello, I am Melissa Mieyr, and just like you were saying, absolutely, it is the largest expenditure next to purchasing a home. And I don't think people think of it like that. And think about if you've got multiple children, what that burden can be, and you really have to plan up front. And, we buy a home and we get pre-approved, and we buy a car and we get pre-approved. Well, there's no such real thing like that for college. And so we have to, as consumers, do that ourselves. And so it means doing a lot of research in this process. So it can be very scary.
It is. And I had two kiddos, right? And I had set aside 529 plans. So I at least didn't have to worry too much on that side of it. But I know that we missed steps. I know that there were some things that we probably could have done that would have helped us with maybe paying a little bit less. But, so I'm just interested in hearing in retrospect. I'll probably just be like, oh my gosh, we didn't do that right. But what you're suggesting and just your knowledge. So I know the name of our show today is Merit Aid versus Need-Based Aid, but can you level set us a little bit and give us what some of these terms mean that we hear people talking about? I know EFC is one of them. I know FAFSA, which is really hard to say, is another thing that people get confused by. Can you just kind of give us what in the heck those mean?
Yeah, so some of the major terms, one of the things is also COA, cost of attendance. That's what you want to know for sure. And that's all of those things that are involved in the cost. There's direct cost, which is going to be your tuition and room and board. Those are things you're going to be handed a bill for. And then there's the indirect costs, like your books and some other fees and transportation and things like that it takes to live while you're at college, and all those other expenses. And then you have your expected family contribution, that is the EFC, and that is calculated from the FAFSA. And the expected family contribution is basically an index in which the school utilizes to figure out if they're going to be able to grant you some aid. And so it's that cost of attendance minus the EFC equals your need. And that EFC is gotten from the FAFSA, and that formula changes a little bit every year, and that is determined by the Department of Education. And that comes into cycle in October of the senior year is the first time that we do it. And that is applying for aid for the following school year.
Okay. And will you also tell me on this? So the very first time you fill it out is that senior year, the October of senior year. And there's something about a 2-year where it goes back, or what am I thinking of?
Yeah, it's what we call the prior year. So for instance, if you have a student that is going to graduate in 2023, you're going to use the 2021 tax return that you're in the process of getting calculated right now. So that's why it's so important to do this process and think through it far enough in the future or in the past before we start going through all this. If you're not future planning, which means the spring of the sophomore year, through the fall of the junior year, it's that tax year that is the one that is being used. So if you're not doing things, in an efficient manner before that, then those are some things that you want to think about. If you're wanting to make any changes to your financial picture or anything like that, it's got to happen before that tax year, or that, that's what's going to be showing up on that FAFSA.
Right. Well, and with that being said, if you're a high income earner, should you do any of this? I mean, is there any opportunity for you to save money?
So, if you're a business owner, there are things that you can do very different. We know, just like we do on our taxes, we do everything we can to lower our taxes. So some families do things, you can do things different as a business owner. Depends on where your assets are located, those kinds of things. The high income earner, that doesn't always affect the fact that you can have need, because it's going to depend on that list of schools, because the higher the cost of the school, the more need you are going to have. And you can be a very decent high income earner and still have need. So that's why it's so important to go through the process of getting and figuring out what your EFC approximately is early in the process, so that you can go through this. And just like when we buy an airline ticket, doing things timely, doing things correctly, there's different times of the week that you can get a cheaper airline ticket. You play the game and you get a better price. And so timing is everything. That's huge in the process, and knowing which schools are going to be givers. If you are looking at like an Ivy League kind of school, you have to know that those schools are only need-based aid givers. They don't give merit-based aid. So looking at those, if it is important for you to get a discount, and that's basically what the aid system is. It's a discount system of getting that better price, is looking at which schools give the way you are able to earn that discount. So
I've got another question on that. And that is, when you say merit aid, are you saying like they're assured scholarships? Is that the same thing?
So there are different schools do things differently. So some schools have like what we call a grid system. Like, there are not as many of the schools out there that actually have that, but some schools you can find, and they literally have, you make this GPA, and if they're still using test scores and this test score, you're going to get X dollars. So some schools are like that. Some schools, they have a range, and they decide what that dollar is that you're going to get. But those are going to sometimes depend on, when you're in that kind of range situation, some of the things that the student participates in, their grades, it's going to be more of a holistic kind of thing. And so merit aid is based on academics, talents, skills, how involved the student is. And some schools give large scholarships, for instance, for national merit, but some don't. So, if you have a national merit student, you need to be looking at the schools that give for that purpose versus those that don't. And also, there's the real misnomer about athletics. Oh, I can get a full ride for my athletics, and that's not necessarily the case. And
Right.
Actually, it's better to have academic-based money, because what if you get hurt, or what if you decide, I need to really concentrate on my studies, and the student needs to, back off of that athletic piece. Well, if you had an athletic scholarship, then it's going to go away if they step away from that. So those things are really important to process as you are going through and looking for where's the money going to come from.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Melissa, I talk to my clients a lot about, I work with families, helping them to figure out a career path before they go to college so that they can get through school in 4 years and enjoy school while they're there and be confident and all those good things. But I'm a fact girl, and I'm like, you know what? Pick a school based on, yes, I've gone in and it feels like home. But I think that for parents, you also have to put some parameters out there based on what these schools are going to cost. So I like going in with the facts, to be able to say, hey, this is in our range, or this could be if we can get some of these merit aid scholarships. So, at least I think at that point, you don't set your kid up for disappointment because, I can tell you my husband went to TCU, my kids went to school there, or to football games, throughout their schooling. So in their head, they're like, we're going to TCU. And, my husband and I were both going, I'm sorry, but unless you can get some really good help, that's not a place that you can go. And, it was tough for them. It was tough for them to hear that. But I think parents have to be conscious of that, right? And really think through it. Now, if you can afford any school, great. Yay for you, and your kids can go anywhere, awesome. But there's so many families that can't, And so I love that there's a place to go to really just be able to figure that out. And I know you're going to tell us more about that. So, I'll quit jumping in, but I do like walking in with the facts in front of you. And that's really what you're saying that there is, right?
Right. Absolutely. Most families wouldn't hand their student or child their checkbook or credit card or however you want to pay for a car and say, oh, go on the car lot and pick out any one that you want. We don't do that. And so when you're telling your student to, make the list, whatever you want, and we'll figure it out, that's exactly what you're doing.
I don't even let them go to the grocery store with my credit card. It's like, so yeah. I'm not.
So regardless of what your income level is, that's kind of a crazy thing to do. We wouldn't do that. And so that's not what we want to do with this whole college thing either. We want to make that list of schools, research that list of schools, find out what percentage of aid is given at that campus. So number one, overall, how much or how many students get some kind of aid. And you'll find out that a lot of schools give a large number of students some kind of aid. And like I said, merit-based scholarships is also considered aid. Need-based is considered aid, and loans are considered aid. So you have to know what kind you're getting. You want to look at the big picture and find out, is what we're getting what we call gift money, and that's the free money, because that's not going to affect your bottom dollar. That's going to reduce your bottom cost. Whereas if you got self-help, which would be a loan or work study, that's actually going to add, because you're going to pay back those loans plus interest. So that net cost overall will actually become higher. So those are things that you want to look at. You can do your research. Like I love collegedata.com. You can go in and look under the financial area, and you can see what percentage of students receive aid, what percent is need-based, what percent is merit-based. And those are the things that you want to know. And also, some things that people don't think about is the graduation rate, the 4-year graduation rate. If you're going to have to pay for a 5th or a 6th year, that's going to escalate that cost. And so what is the graduation rate, on a 4-year basis?
Yes, because if you get assured scholarships from a school, what happens after year 4?
They go away.
They go away. I can tell you, I know that firsthand. Yeah, because I had a kiddo that, needed to make a change freshman year and rolled into that 5th year. And that was a $50,000 year for us.
Yeah.
That's a big hit, people. And, just knowing that, I hear people always saying to their kids, everybody changes their majors. Don't worry about it. Just go figure it out as you go. And I'm like, it's not the best plan,
No.
right?
And that's what I
Unfortunately,
tell my families all the time when I do that. If you don't have some idea or a direction, maybe you need to take a step back, because it's going to cost you time and it's going to cost you money. So parents, it's going to cost you money for the tuition, and it's also going to cost you on the other side of that, the students' time. And then when they're a young adult, they're staying in school longer, and so it's that opportunity for them to have been earning a wage themselves. So it's that double-sided situation there. So it's a killer.
it is. And I got to tell you, it goes back to just knowing the data and knowing that, this could be the outcome. And if you're okay with that, that's okay too, right? As a parent, if you're like, take the extra year, we don't care, the kiddo feels good about it, that's awesome. But it goes back to, at least, let's have the conversations up front to go, what is the plan? What are we going to be okay with? What are we not going to be okay with? Because it does matter, and I will tell you, not only on the financial side, which I'm super frugal, so I got to tell you, that's always at the top of my list to consider. But on the emotional side too, that these kids are, looking around and they think everybody else has their life figured out. And sometimes, when they're changing majors and having to take that extra year, it weighs on them that way too. So, just one of the softer sides of college and, what our kids are going through. So.
Absolutely. And it's much easier to do your research up front and be able to have those conversations now, instead of when they get accepted and go, oh, I'm sorry, you did all this work and I'm going to have to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so much easier to have those numbers. I mean, numbers don't lie. And when you can pull your data and lay that in front of your child and have a young adult conversation with them and go, okay, here's what it is. But if we don't get X dollars and bring it to this price, now that it has to come off the table of our final choices.
Well, let's talk about that. So I mean, let's face it, we know that the bulk of college planning goes on junior and senior year, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in a perfect world, is that where you would start? And I'm just talking about the financial piece of this.
So as I mentioned, spring of sophomore through the fall of junior is the tax year that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one piece that you want in order. And then the other piece is that list. Whenever you make that list, I know for the families that I work with, I really encourage the application process to start as soon as school is out the junior year. And so having that solid list that you are ready to start pushing forward with applications, I say needs to be done by May of your junior year. So that means all of this has to happen prior to that. Knowing how each of those schools that are on the list are going to impact your pocketbook in the long run is going to be really important. And unfortunately, the whole college process is a lot of unknowns. We go into this, even when we do research, we don't know exactly how it's going to turn out on the other side. But at least we can use the historical data to give us a really good idea and have some parameters of where we think it's going to be. And so that allows us to have that research, make that list, have it done by May of junior year. And that way, when June rolls around, all summer, you can be working on those applications and getting that in.
Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat, we have a timeline at College Planning Untangled that I'm going to provide that the people can get, which supports what you're saying, and when to have that completed. So Yeah, that's all really good information. And I think too, for families to really kind of understand what needs to happen when does help to just reduce the stress around this whole thing, this whole college planning process that we all get to go through.
Yeah.
So, all right. So what have you not talked about? Because I know that I asked questions and probably threw you off your list of what you wanted to make sure everybody knew about. What have we missed?
So one of the things I mentioned earlier is like your Ivy type schools don't give merit-based aid because every single school there or every student there is worthy of that. And so doing some of that research, you can Google, all the schools that meet 100% of need, and those schools that are going to be on the top of that list are going to be your ones that are not your merit givers, but also, as I mentioned, collegedata.com is a great resource to utilize for that. And so those are some of the resources that I really like. And I utilize a software within my company that I use when I work with families that really gets into the nitty gritty of all of that. And the College Board, that EFC calculator there, it's a very generic one. But what I utilize with clients has gotten down into some of the nuances, like there is the federal method, which is the FAFSA, and then there's also the CSS profile, which is another method that many of our private schools use. So your home, for instance, comes into play as one of those assets, and the formula that I use really looks into that carefully, because some schools weigh it a lot, some schools weigh it a little bit, and so that can make a difference. And so when I work with families, we really get into the fine details of all of that, and then working through the process of within your own family's assets, income, whatever, how are you going to take care of that? And so and do not just look at the child going through school right now. If you've got multiple children, look at the big picture. This affects them. You don't want the first child to get everything and then the other children
get nothing. Yes.
Don't get anything. And then there's some animosity between siblings. And then also we have to retire at some point in time. And we cannot make this decision in a vacuum. It's kind of like a Rubik's Cube. If you turn the cube, it affected the other side. So, your retirement, your other children, your other expenses, if you are taking on grandparents, parents, whatever, to have to deal with, their health issues or something like that, those things come into play. So you have to consider everything. I've even worked with families that have gotten divorced during this process. I've had a family that the father passed away during this process. So it's really thinking about it logically and not overextending yourself in this process. And the FAFSA is really, really important. So many people say, I'm not going to fill that out because I make too much. It's worth your while doing it. For instance, the family that I had that passed away, the father passed away, it's so much easier to go in and just do a change of circumstance than having to go through that when your mind's not there. But also, if it had not already been in place, it would have been much harder to go through that altogether.
Yeah.
So it is so important to do it, and to get the federal loans. If you want loans, you have to do the FAFSA. So that's a really important piece of all this process. And I could rattle on a whole another hour about loans and all that and how that works. But yeah, so it's just really important to plan. Hope is not a plan. And so,
Right. Yes. Well, and for our listeners, if you're interested in knowing more and about the financial piece of this, and as you can see, there's a lot to really be thinking about. Melissa's information is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So InfoQuestCFS.com. And, reach out and ask questions. I mean, we are here to help you and to help make this process a little bit simpler for you. So, definitely reach out, ask the questions, and, both she and I are happy to help. All right, Melissa, I appreciate all the information, and we probably need to schedule another one of these where we dig into some of these other things, right? So
absolutely.
more to come.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
All right.